Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by sharing exactly what I've been doing in my own allotment, my own kitchen garden, based on over 30 years of growing my own food. But I still learn something new every single day. Now this week we have got a bit of an update in the kitchen garden with regards to hosepipe bans that seem to be going on all over the place. I've also got more of an update going on in the potting shed and the greenhouse here at home. And then finally, I'm going to talk to you about keeping chickens. So without much ado, let's get into it, shall we? Well, I'm sat here in my kitchen garden. It's the last weekend in July and it has been another eventful weekend here. And I say that because over the last few months I've been talking a lot about the lack of rainfall and how worried it's got me. And I know many of us are in a hosepipe ban area. Now, it doesn't affect me at the moment. We have not got a hosepipe ban in my area, but I know there are many parts of the country that are facing hosepipe bans, and that basically means you're not allowed to use a hosepipe to water your garden, to wash your car, etc., etc. Now, when I've been researching into hosepipe bans as to whether or not you can use a hosepipe to water vegetables, I have found conflicting answers to that question. So the BBC, for example, has said that you can still use a hosepipe to water vegetables. However, a friend of mine who used to work for Thames Water has said, no, that's not true. You can't use a hosepipe. So I don't know what is strictly true and what isn't. My advice is, if you are facing a hosepipe ban, look into whether or not you can use a hosepipe for watering your vegetable garden. Contact your local water supplier to find out what their rules are. Now, in both cases, it is discouraged from using a hosepipe to water your vegetable garden if you are in a hosepipe ban area. And personally, I prefer to use a watering can to water my vegetable garden anyway. Now, recently I did invest in a water pump, which has certainly saved me a lot of time watering the vegetable garden, and I've used that quite nicely. And it's certainly something that I would use a lot more of. But what has happened over this weekend, as you know, I've been having a lot of work going on in my house with the driveway, the paths, and in particular, the drains. Well, last week my drains got dug up. We had collapsed drains that we didn't know about. We've noticed there's a lot of moisture under the foundations of the house. Luckily, it's not too serious, but it has shown us that there has been water escaping from our drains for quite a while. Not the end of the world. This is something that is being sorted, but it just has meant that this weekend in particular, we have not been able to put anything down the drain. So we've not been able to flush the toilet. We've not been able to put any washing up water down the drains, bath water, etc., etc. This has led me to having to be a bit inventive with what we can do with our grey water. Now, our black water, which would be coming out of the toilet, that we only have one option. We're using a camping toilet, and that's all we can do with that. We cannot use that in the garden. Although I do hear stories of people creating composting toilets in the garden, which not something I would do, but it's something that if we were that way inclined, might be a way of making more compost or something in the future, recycling a waste product. But the real thing that I've noticed this weekend is just how wasteful we can be with grey water. Now, grey water would be what comes out of our washing machines, our dishwashers, or washing up, or our bath water or shower water. Normally that runs down the drains and out to sea. Well, because we haven't been able to put it down the drains, we've had to be a bit inventive. So the washing machine, dishwasher hasn't been used. Washing up we've been doing by hand, and then pouring the washing up bowl, once we've finished washing up, into the garden. Now, in the past, I've always avoided doing this because I've always believed that rainwater is best for our vegetable gardens. After all, that's why I have 16 water butts. That's normally enough to keep my vegetable gardening growing. But the use of this grey water has made me think, how can we use it more in the future, and what benefit can we do in our garden? And I've been thinking that actually our grass areas or our ornamentals, we could use grey water. So we've been pouring the washing up water onto the grass, and it's starting to make it look much, much greener and much better. And it's the same with our bathwater. Now, the bathwater has been a little tricky to come up with an option. Luckily, because I brought this water pump a few weeks ago, I've managed to run it into the bath and pump water out into the grass area as well. So it's kind of worked in a very good way, that we are able to maintain our dignity, shall we say. But it has got me thinking about, in the future, when all this work is done, could I put another water butt in order to catch our bath water, our kitchen washing up water, and use that on the grass areas more in the future? Now, you may be wondering, why am I worried about keeping the grass green? Why am I worried about watering our grass areas? After all, it's just grass. It's not edible. To be honest, it's more for me about looking after the soil. And I say that because hydrated soil is much, much more full of life, much better for the environment, much better soil than if it gets hydrophobic, if it gets dry and loses any moisture in the soil. So although we keep our vegetable beds hydrated, the soil is looked after by staying hydrated. I'm thinking what we could do is keep our grass areas in that same sort of state, just by using grey water, looking after our soils. And that, I think, will have a knock-on effect with our vegetable beds, because if our vegetable beds are good soil and our grass areas are good soil, they're going to work better together. There's going to be more life, more worms in the soil, and that should all lead to good vegetables. So this segment has been slightly different in the kitchen garden. It's been very interesting just having this thought process going on and seeing what we could do to preserve more of our water. We're lucky in that we don't tend to use any harmful chemicals in our daily life anyway. We do tend to use natural products such as Ecover, which is absolutely fine to use in the garden anyway. But I would love to know if you use the grey water in your garden for anything like this as well. Right, I'm going to head on into the potting shed now, my new shed. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, it's that time of this show where I ask you to do me a favour, and that is quite simply, if you are enjoying this podcast, then please do leave us a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it really helps us out and gets us found by more people who might be also interested in learning more about how to grow their own food. But not only that, if you are enjoying this podcast, you would like to help keep it running, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. For just £5 a month, you help keep this podcast running. But in return for that £5, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you a bit of an idea of what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. Not only that, every month that you are a member, you will receive our seed pack. And in that seed pack, you get a copy of our mini newspaper, which shares a few tasks that you can be doing throughout that month, a few seeds that you can also sow that month. But also in that mini newspaper, it gives you instructions on to how to grow a collection of seeds that are included in that seed pack. And these seeds have been carefully chosen by myself to be sown in that very month. So these seeds, they're not hanging around waiting to be sown. They are able to be sown in that very month. And all that is just £5 a month. Added to that, it helps keeps this podcast running. Now this week from the Supporters Club, we've been sowing some spring cabbages, which we're going to be sowing. We're going to be growing those right throughout the winter, ready for next, one of the early vegetables next year. We do like cabbages, and they are one that are well worth sowing several times throughout the year. Now, if that sounds like something you would be interested in, then please head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Well, I'm here in my brand new shed now, and I wanted to give you a bit of an update with how the shed is working out, because I'm really pleased with it so far. I've always been pleased with this shed. It's a fantastic little addition to the garden. It has enabled us to really get growing a lot of seeds rather efficiently. And I say that because I'm looking out here, I've got a collection of kale plants, chard plants, winter cabbages, microgreens, lettuce, all things that are in line to go out into the garden, or they're in very young stages. So it's really working having this shed set up entirely for propagation. And for me, this has been one of the most important things that I've always tried to remember when it comes to gardening, is that it is about being organised and being efficient. This is a word I use quite often, efficient in the gardening. So what I mean by that is that when I get up in the morning, I tend to come out to this shed and I will sow just one pack of seeds pretty much every morning at the moment, just in order to keep things going. That only takes seconds, and then I pop it into one of the trays for when they start to grow, to get them germinating. Now I tend to use plug plants a lot because plug plants are working quite well at just being easy to get growing. And what I mean by that is, for example, if we look at my kale, which was our seed of the month, the kale is now at the point where I think we can start hardening them off and get them ready to go outside. Each plug plant had a single kale seed inside each one to get germinated. Now I'm looking at them and they are pretty much all germinated. They are good 10 centimetres tall plants. They are ready to go outside. And the reason I like using plug plants is because I haven't got to pot these up. I can just take them out. All the roots are growing around the base of these plug plants. They're growing really, really strongly. So all I've got to do is pop them out, pot them in the ground, give them a good watering, and they should grow well. And it's the same with the chard, the winter lettuce, and everything else. Everything is just working really efficiently at getting started. And this is all starting from just a few minutes work every single morning. We've also been starting off some microgreens, cress, fenugreek, and other microgreens. Again, this is something we do tend to eat quite a bit of, and something we quite enjoy. And this has been fantastic for growing microgreens on these trays as well. We just simply start them off, one of my seeds every day, and as soon as they're ready, we cut them down and we take them into the kitchen. Now, we're hoping over the winter that we're going to be able to continue using this area for, of course, sowing seeds, but microgreens as well, something that we are quite fond of. A good, healthy vegetable, quick to grow, quick way to add a bit of salad into our diets, and just things like cress added to an egg sandwich or something like that just makes things a little bit tastier. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, here we are in July, the end of July. Aren't you running out of seeds to sow? No, I'm not running out of seeds to sow. In fact, next week we'll probably go more. We've got a seed of a month, of course, but we'll go more into all the seeds that we can sow throughout August as well. But one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is my greenhouse. Now, my greenhouse and my propagation shed, I'm using the autopots to grow these plants. So my propagation shed, of course, has the trays, which is working great. In the greenhouse, I've got the pots. So we got the 4-pot system, the 2-pot system, which we've expanded, and we're getting aubergines, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, chillies, strawberries, all of which are growing really, really well, needing very, very little work inside that greenhouse as well. And when I say very little work, is that I do tend to pop in there on a daily basis, check on my plants, check they're all growing well. About once a week I like to check how much water we have in the reservoirs. But the amount of tomatoes that we're getting from that one greenhouse is absolutely amazing. Same with the chillies and everything else. We're just getting so many vegetables from the greenhouse, which is 6 foot by 6 foot. It is absolutely amazing. Now we have been having to remove some of our lower leaves on the tomatoes because they are growing quite tall. They're producing these beautiful tomatoes, but the lower leaves, if we start stripping them out up to the point where your tomatoes are, so if you start from the bottom, you remove leaves until you reach your first set of tomatoes. What this does is it actually encourages the plants to really start to ripen the tomatoes, starts to speed up the ripening process. So we've been doing that as well, which is something most gardeners will do in order to encourage those beautiful red ripe tomatoes. And that is something that we have been doing too. Again, this is one of the advantages. When I go out in the morning, it's still quite nice and cool to go out into the greenhouse and do this. So it doesn't take too long to do, only a few minutes. Pick a few tomatoes at the same time, a few aubergines, which are absolutely delicious. Aubergines for me have been one of those plants that I find a lot of people do struggle with. And this year we've had our best aubergines. I've got to be honest with you, our best aubergines inside the greenhouse. And the secret I found with aubergines is to start them early. December, January is when I start to sow aubergines. They need a long growing period, but they also need sun and warmth. And I'm finding in the greenhouse is just doing them the world of good. Added to that, the autopots, which keeps the soil hydrated and fed, paying off dividends. It's fantastic, fantastic. Now, out in the actual kitchen garden itself, we have also been harvesting lots of other vegetables, cabbages, courgettes, peas, a few beans. Everything is doing really, really, really well. We could have been doing better if we had more peas and more beans, but it has been a tough year for that. And I was just looking at my beetroot as well, which is looking really, really good too. So what I'm really getting at, we've got plenty of food that we've grown just in the kitchen garden this week. But one of the big things that we always harvest as well on a daily basis is the eggs from our chickens. And I want to talk about our chickens for a bit because I've had a question come in about chickens. But I've also had a bit of news with regards to the chickens, a bit of sad news just to warn you. But we'll go into that after we have heard from Chef Scott with his recipe of the week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here with this week's recipe. And this week we have a blackberry chilli sauce that works well with meat, fish and vegetables. But I like to use it with crispy duck instead of hoisin sauce or with barbecue meats. So let's not delay and head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. As usual, you can find this recipe and others on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seed to Table, Plot 13. For this recipe, you will need the zest and juice of 1 lime, 300 grams of blackberries, 50 grams of castor sugar, 3 tablespoons of light soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of honey, half a teaspoon of ginger paste, a 1/4 teaspoon of 5-spice powder, and 1 tablespoon of sriracha sauce. Method: put all the ingredients into a saucepan and bring to a boil, then reduce to a low simmer and cook for 30 minutes, stirring occasionally. After 30 minutes, pass through a fine mesh sieve and allow to cool and serve. And that's it from me this week.
Well, I've got to say that was a fantastic surprise from Chef Scott when I got that recipe. It's not something I expected, but it sounds like a really, really interesting way to use blackberries and chillies, something that are in abundance at the moment. Now, moving on from that, I'm in the potting shed and I have had a request from Kate to share about how to go about keeping chickens for the first time owner this is. Now, this is quite fitting. I've kept chickens for quite a few years now, and for me, I would not be without chickens. I feel they really make the garden, especially the vegetable garden, They give us a wide range of benefits. They give us pest control, they give us eggs, they give us entertainment, and they're really good at scratching the soil and giving us manure at the same time. Now, the sad news is, and I'm going to really say this is quite sad news, I get quite upset about this. So one of my first chickens was Bear, who we've had for 10 years now. She's unfortunately taken a turn for the worst in the last few days, and I've had to isolate her because she is a very old bird and she is not eating or drinking. She's tough. She's just holding on in there and refusing to unfortunately pass away, as tragic as that sounds. Now, she's 10 years old. She's had her long life, to say the least. Most chickens, 10 years is pretty good lifespan. Some chickens have been known to live up to 23 years, so there's quite a way to go, but 10 years is a very good lifespan for a chicken. And she's given me a lot of entertainment over the years. She's really helped us out in the garden. She's been the top of the pecking order, but she is old. She is old. In the last few weeks, really, I've noticed that the other 3 chickens have been a little bit more fighty. They've been a little bit more upset, and I think it's because as Bear's been keeping herself to herself a bit more, the other 3 have been sorting out the pecking order. However, a few days ago, just Bear was not coming out of the coop at all. So I've isolated her, put her into our shed, and we're keeping a close eye on her. But I don't think she'll be here tomorrow, in all honesty. It's really sad, I've got to say. And yeah, I'm not comfortable talking about it, to be honest, because I get really upset. Anyway, where are we going with that in order to answer Kate's question about how to go about keeping chickens? The first thing I always say is that chickens are a living, breathing animal. So if you're going to keep chickens, you've got to be prepared that they are a commitment. Bear's 10 years old, so it's a long-term commitment. Also, things like going away on holiday. You cannot just leave the chickens to survive on their own. They need something in place that can look after them when you go away on holiday, or if you work away a lot. Although I think they are great to have in a garden, and to a certain extent, if you're going away for 1 or 2 days, they can be fine. But if you're away a lot, you've got to think about how you're going to look after those chickens while you're away. Anyway, once you've thought about that and you've got answers for that, the next thing I feel you need to look at is how secure is your garden. Now, I say that because my garden is fairly secure. We've got high fences all the way around. We have got pretty secure garden, but foxes still have made their way in from time to time. Foxes are incredibly cunning animals. They will dig under fences. They will climb over fences. I believe they can jump up to 6 foot in height. So they are incredibly clever animals, but they will be attracted by the chickens. So it's well worth keeping foxes or making your garden as secure. Other predators, of course, too. In fact, I was visiting a animal rescue recently. I sponsor a turkey, basically, and a rescue turkey. Long story. But while we were visiting my turkey, they also had chickens running around in the pen. And a mink had somehow snuck in and was going for these chickens. I've never seen a mink before, so it was really fascinating, but at the same time, really quite eye-opening. So although we talk a lot about foxes, there are other animals to think about, such as badgers, mink, stoats, and even household cats as well, or dogs for that matter. So you've got to really think about how secure your garden is as the first line of defence for your chickens. Now, this is particularly important if you're going to let your chickens free range around your garden. We used to let our chickens roam around the garden all day long. And they were really, really happy doing that. We didn't mind because they were looking after the place. And then, unfortunately, a fox came in the middle of the day and attacked one of our chickens. The fox was trying to train her young on how to attack, sort of thing, how to get food. Not necessarily the fox's fault, it's just doing what it naturally did. My wife ran out there with a mop to scare off the fox. But our garden is pretty secure. Now, we still do like to let our chickens roam the garden now, but we have to make sure that we're out in the garden when we let them roam the garden. We also have to keep Roxy and our dog in at the same time. So keeping the garden secure is the first line of defence. But most of the time, the chickens live inside their run, which is also incredibly secure. Now, we've got quite a large run. And in fact, I would like to make it larger to give them more room to run around. Now, the run that we have is also attached to the coop, which is effectively where the chickens will sleep at night. Now, I've gone for the omelette chicken coop with attached run. For me, omelette are one of the best chicken coops out there. They're made of plastic, which makes it very, very easy to clean, very, very easy to maintain. The chickens seem very happy in it as well. It's nice and cool in the summer and nice and warm in the winter, so they get quite happy in there. I used to have a wooden coop, and the wooden coop was also absolutely fine, except it was harder to clean, but also we would sometimes in the middle of summer, around this sort of time, we would get these tiny little bugs inside the coop, tiny little mites. So we're actually very, very itchy on our hands and over our bodies. We could feel them crawling around. And this discouraged the chickens from going into the coop when that happened. What we found is since we've used this omelette chicken coop, we haven't had these mites. But again, wooden coops is absolutely fine. You've just got to bear in mind, keep it clean and keep it treated well. So security is probably one of the first things you will need. Secure garden and a secure place for the chickens to stay. Moving on from that, we're going to need food and we're going to need water. Now, food, I tend to use chicken layer pellets, which are available from pet shops and a wide range of places. I actually get mine from farm suppliers. I found that to be the cheapest place to get them from. It's about £10 for a 20 kilo bag of chicken layer pellets. And that 20 kilo bag will last about a month with 4 fully grown chickens. All I simply do every morning when we go out to the chickens, we place the food in there along with some fresh water as well. We've got little pots that come as part of the omelette range that hang on the side. Every night we bring the food in as well. Now, the reason we bring it in at night is due to rats. If we leave the food out there, we do find that rats make an easy target. They're after the food and they tend to get the problem. Now, there is a saying, if you keep chickens, you also keep rats as well. We find that if we keep on top of it, we keep things clean, we keep food indoors during night, we pretty much eliminate the risk of rats, but we do keep careful eyes on that at the same time. And it's the same with water. Rats are just after food and water, shelter, etc., etc. So we do find that if we keep on top of keeping the food in, keeping the water out, we do get away with it. Now, there are certain chicken feeders that if a chicken stands on a ledge, it lifts up a panel and the chickens can access the food. That we used to use quite a lot, actually. What I found with that, however, was that the chickens would then stand inside the feeder and poop. So all the layers pellets would get covered in poop. So I don't necessarily use that anymore. We find that the ones that hang on the side of the coop are good enough for us. But again, we just remember to bring them in at night, and that eliminates the risk of rats. So we've got the security, we've got the food, we've got the water. What else do we need to think about? Well, wood shavings and straw also need to be placed in the coop. The wood shavings soak up any wee and any poo that the chickens produce, and the wood shavings make a nice little nesting area. Now, chickens tend to lay in a nest box, which is just a small area. Think of a shoebox or something like that, laid with straw. They'll just use that to make a nest to lay their eggs. Many coops actually come with the nest box already attached, especially the omelette, so that's fairly easy to think of. But I've known people who have converted sheds and they've just placed in there like a shoebox for the chickens to lay their eggs in with straw. So That's all you really need. Straw, wood shavings, a decent coop, food, water. As an occasional treat for the chickens, I also give them some corn every now and then, but I also try and feed them some greens such as cabbage leaves, cauliflower, Swiss chard, etc., lettuce, especially food that isn't the best. We give that to the chickens and they seem to enjoy it too. Also caterpillars and things like that I've mentioned in the past. So that is all you need. That is all you need for chickens. Really, really easy. And then you need to think about the chickens themselves. Now, I tend to get my chickens from the farm suppliers as well. I buy point of lay chickens. They're usually around 18 weeks of old, fully vaccinated, ready to go to their homes, and they will be expected to start laying eggs within a few weeks. Reason I go for point of lay is purely because we know they're good. They're easy to get started. You can home them. You can get them used to being in their new surroundings. We could get some fertilised eggs, but when it comes to using fertilised eggs, there is a risk that you could get cockerels, and we don't really want cockerels in the back garden. The reason for that is you will not be popular with your neighbours when those cockerels start cuckooing at 4 o'clock in the morning, just as the sun rises in the middle of summer. Not good at all. So we don't have cockerels, we just have female chickens. And there is a risk, of course, if you get fertilised eggs, you hatch them, you could end up with cockerels. It is a cheaper way, of course. We could also get chickens that have been rescued from farms. Now, farms often get rid of their chickens when they're about 18 months of age, and that's because they tend to lay less eggs when they reach that age. And that's certainly true. We find 2 years is when our chickens reduce the amount of eggs that they lay. So every 2 years, we're buying in new chickens so that we can keep our egg production high. They can lay eggs for much longer if they are looked after and have the right conditions, of course. But on a whole, after 2 years, the amount of eggs that they produce is a lot less. And as I said, rescue chickens as well. I often feel if you are the first time at keeping chickens that, like rescue dogs and other things, they need a bit more TLC, a bit more understanding. And somebody who has a bit more experience with chickens is probably going to be better at using rescued chickens. Not to put you off or anything, I think it's a good course nonetheless. But I just feel that if you want to really look after the chickens that you get, you need to have a bit of experience. Some of the rescue chickens, they will be missing feathers, they may even struggle to walk and things like that, so they do need a bit of care and attention. Now, this brings me up to choosing the variety of chickens that you might want, because there's lots of different varieties of chickens out there, and I've had quite a few over the years. Bear was a gold line, which is your standard brown variety of chicken that you might see in the farm. As I said, she's been a good bird, she's been a good layer over the years, but she did last for quite a long time. I've also had a couple of ambers in the past as well. Now, ambers for me have been a really good bird because they lay eggs all year round. Some chickens don't lay eggs in the winter months, but the ambers did lay eggs all year round, and they done very, very well. Good temperament, good for the backyard as well. One of my chickens at the moment is called a leghorn, and she lays white eggs, which is also good. I like a bit of variety. I'd like to get some blue and green egg layers in the future, but we do like a bit of variety as well. The thing is, all these different varieties have different temperaments and make them more or less suitable for keeping in the backyard. So do a bit of research on what variety you're going to get. Have a word with your supplier as well and find out what they recommend too. So we're set up, we've got the chickens, we're all ready to go. What do we need to do as we move forward? Well, when you get your chickens, what I recommend you do is you just lock them in the coop for the first 24 hours so that they calm down, they get used to their coop, they know that that's somewhere safe that they can go and roost at night. And then after 24 hours, you can let them out into the run. Now, I wouldn't let them out of a run if you were planning on free ranging for the first couple of weeks. Reason being is they need to learn their surroundings at first. So just get them used to being in their coop and being in their run for the first couple of weeks. Let them find out where the food is, how your routine works and things like that, just to settle them in. What you will find when it gets dark, the chickens will actually take themselves off to bed, take them back to their coop automatically. You don't have to do anything until they have gone into their coop. And then when it's dark, I go out and I lock the chickens up, simply closing the door to the coop and bring in their food. In the morning, my wife tends to do this more in the morning now. She goes out, she puts the food and water in and opens up the coop and lets the chickens out for the day. They're still in their run, but when I come home from work in the evenings, it's when we start to let them out into the garden a bit more. Once a week, I like to clean the chickens out, which means basically brushing all the manure, the poop from the coop into a bin with all the sawdust and straw and let that rot down. That really is how easy it is to look after chickens. Once a month, it's also worth giving the coop a good clean out, and once a year, a good spring clean of the coop as well. Also worth keeping an eye on your chickens and just checking they are happy, they're healthy and doing what they should be doing. Fairly easy thing to look after. You will find the more you interact with the chickens, the more they get used to you and more they interact with you. They're fantastic pets that give you eggs at the same time. But just as a starter, that's all you got to think about: security, food, water, and how are you going to look after them. Good starting places. There's lots of books on the subjects, but that really is how easy it is. Right, with that, it is time to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please do consider leaving us a rating and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us and helps us get found by more people who might also be interested in learning how to grow more of their own food. Now, we have had a comment coming over this last week from Lynn, and she says, "Hi Richard, I did think your story about the broken lock was quite funny." And another great recipe this week from Lynn too. Thank you so much for that, Lynn. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. If you've got anything you want us to add to anything that we've discussed today, then please do leave us a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then please consider becoming a member of the supporters club that we spoke about earlier. And of course, if you want to get in touch, you can go through email, which my email address is richard@veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. You can also head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk, which is our website, and leave a comment or leave us a voicemail. And finally, don't forget you can find us on social media. We will be back again next time, so until then, please take care.